right, welcome everyone to Industry Connect. I'm Mark Henderson, the CEO of AHI, and our Industry Connect channel aims to connect our industry and keep up to speed with the latest trends in business and technology. Now, before I introduce you to our guest today, I've also got AHI's Learning and Development Manager, Kellie Dunn, on the call with us today. Welcome, Kel.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
Great to have you here from sunny Ballarat. Now, today we're interviewing, and we're really excited to have this interview. We're interviewing award-winning international speaker, trainer, and workplace health consultant, Anna Feringa. Anna helps Australian businesses transition from fearful and confused to confident and responsive. So this is going to be good, especially when faced with mental health challenges in the workplace. A really, really topical topic, Anna, and it's great to have you here with Kellie and I on AHI's Industry Connect channel. Welcome.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Kellie. I'm pretty excited to be here and spend some time with the AHI.
Yeah, brilliant. No, it's great to have you. And look, it's interesting, just for our audience, we were just talking off air. Kellie's based in Ballarat, and we've got an announcement today that Ballarat's going into a 7-day lockdown. So the mental health of the community across the board has been really challenging. And Anna, I just want to throw to you, if I could, just generally, most of the Australian population's gone into some lockdown or currently in lockdown. I think of those members of ours in New South Wales and Victoria are really doing it tough.
Yeah.
This is really unprecedented times.
Look, absolutely, it's unprecedented times. What I like to call it is it's almost like humanity's been put into an incubation period. We had this, free and easy and I guess from a topical perspective, freedom type of lifestyle. But now we're completely directed and jammed into this sort of incubation period where there's fear for getting crook, there's fear of holding on to a job, there's fear of where is my next pay packet coming from, so all of those really important things that have historically been sitting as a fundamental cause of poor mental health have now been brought to the forefront and impacted everybody, not just select people, depending on their background and predisposition, right? So it's a really unique situation.
Yeah. Now, Anna, you help Australian businesses work through the mental health challenges that they're finding. Your phone must be white hot.
It is white hot. I'm very tired. I know my business manager is very tired. But I guess, it's like a double-edged sword, Mark. I've been for the last 18 years fighting to get, mental health on the agenda of companies. And it's, I hate to say it, it's actually taken a pandemic to make the damn thing important. So the problems were always there. It's just more pertinent now than it ever was because so many of us have been affected all at the one time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Kel, you're not unique in this either because you've got a really extensive background in mental health, particularly with your work that you did at Lifeline. Again, being in rural Victoria, you're seeing some real challenges in the community, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And even yesterday, just out doing some groceries with my family, and that felt weird because, the five of us could be out all at once if we chose to, whereas before it was just one person could go. And just the comments from people randomly, like I was standing next to a lady and realised, oh, hang on, I really wasn't 1.5 metres away from her, so I apologised and moved. And she said, oh, no, that's okay, love. Isn't it great that we can just go out and have a look at salt and pepper shakers? So it was, and that's a, real country sort of comment, but it was something I walked away with and went, oh my goodness, this is something that we can't take for granted anymore. And then less than 24 hours later, we have a snap lockdown called here again. And just thinking about that comment yesterday and the reflections in that for myself and my family are really important.
Absolutely. Look, Kel, let me be full exposure here. I went to Kmart on Saturday and I bought a new bin for our house, and it was bloody the highlight of the weekend. It was even the kids are saying, Dad, that was a really good purchase that you did. So it's kind of a joy to go out shopping. Who would have thought? Now, Anna, you've worked in the mental health space for 18 years. And you mentioned before, it's taken a pandemic for this to get on the radar, right? Heavy on the radar. But over the 18 years, what have you seen? What's changed over that journey in mental health, particularly the way Australian companies are responding to the mental health challenges, as well as government? How do you kind of sum up the last 18 years in your experience?
Look, I think the last 18 years, it'd be a good way to compare it to physical safety, right? So if we all dial back to what physical safety looked like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And, people were dying left, right and centre and getting injured left, right and centre. And, sort of around about the late 80s, early 90s, they started to hammer in some regulation. And people started to, go to work and come home a little bit safer. We still have incidents, but a little bit safer. Mental health is where safety was. I used to say 30 years ago, but with the speed over the last 18 months, it's probably where safety was about 15 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So, there hasn't been a lot of transparent, supportive regulation. You've got a bunch of companies running around going, look, I've heard it's a problem, but, we've got workers' comp and that seems to be being managed, so we'll just crack on. Right. But what they're not realising is the cost reputationally from a production point of view, from a sick leave point of view, and from a workers' comp point of view, that this has been bubbling under the surface for some time. And now it's really starting to jump up and bite employers. And they turn around and go, gosh, where did all this expense and human and financial costs come from? So over the last 18 years, it's been a slow drip. Yep. Okay, so because more and more people have just generally been becoming sicker, and it's the chicken or the egg question, right? Do we know more about it because more people are talking about it, or are more people just getting sick? I don't think anyone in this particular industry has that direct answer, but they're both really important points to make. So my whole 18 years up until about 2 years ago has been in the convincing trade, right? So you guys need this, you're going to benefit from it. Here's a small amount of evidence to show you where employers have invested and the benefits they've gotten out of it. But it's been a real trade show as opposed to a basic hazard mitigation, necessary compliance-based need. So really interesting morphing, particularly in the last 2 years.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's interesting one, when you talk about, are we hearing more about it or people talking about it more? Last week we held an event for Are You OK Day, and we interviewed some awesome Australians who are doing some amazing work on the ground in mental health. And we heard that Lifeline had one of their highest daily peaking calls, 3,500 contacts in one day. Yep. In the 50 odd years of that service. So do you see that people are more likely to reach out looking for support, whereas maybe 15 years ago it was still a kind of taboo topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a blend, Mark. I think it's a matter of, yes, we are talking about it more. So people are feeling, I guess, less conscious or less self-conscious of what this impact means for me if I reach out for help. But then also, I think we're seeing large turns of events where people are left with no option but to reach out. So I think it's two rivers pointing towards an ocean, right? Yeah. And they're both good things. It's not good that people are suffering, but it's good to know that stigma is reducing and resources are increasing where people can seek help in a way and style and platform that they prefer, because everyone's different.
Yeah. And look, today we're going to be talking around some of the support mechanisms for employees and employers around managing mental health in the workplace. You mentioned the workers' compensation schemes. They're clearly under huge pressure right across the country.
Oh, absolutely. And they're under huge pressure because employers, through no fault of their own, I want to make that really clear, haven't really been taught or shown or directed on how to identify and control and mitigate psychosocial risk in workplaces. So you've got a bunch of companies and a bunch of directors and a bunch of CEOs thinking that, yeah, this place has got a pretty good culture, people are relatively safe. But it's amazing the level of psychosocial risks that people don't recognise or don't understand that can validate a claim.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll work through that in a bit of detail too, Anna, because I really think it's important that we educate our viewers around some of those psychosocial risks. Yeah. I suppose one of the challenges, and I was talking about this last week in our Are You OK Day event, I've got one of my children diagnosed by bipolar last year, and taking him through that journey.
Yep.
And I use the analogy with him: if you break your arm, you got 6 to 12 weeks of recovery, and then you're doing physiotherapy, and you can work yourself through that process. It's a little bit different, clearly, with a break in the arm to mental health, and what was it, the slip, trip, fall hazards in the workplace were. Being able to identify what's going to really challenge people is really important.
Absolutely, because you can't argue with a broken arm. You see someone that's physically in pain with a cast on or going to a doctor's appointment, whereas the term mental health, and I want to be able to be really distinctive here. There's a very big difference between mental health and mental illness, and people use the two words intercollectively, and it's mental health. We all have mental health. Not all of us have mental illness, so it's really important that we disseminate that.
Yeah.
But what we were looking at, and I'm going to have to ask you just to remind me what you just asked me, because I tangented.
Yeah. No, I was just from a managing mental health and the psychosocial kind of hazards, and we'll work through that.
Yeah.
Because a break in the arm or a slip on a floor is really tangible. Clearly, we can see it, we can feel it, we can do something about it. When we're talking about the psychosocial realm, it's a whole new challenge.
It's a whole new challenge. That's right, because it's subjective.
Yeah.
Because we can't necessarily see when someone is feeling a flat or withdrawn mood, because we can't really, at times, unless they're having a chronic and overt panic attack, see when someone's feeling anxious. The way in which we elicit behaviour when we're struggling from a mental illness perspective is not clearly and collectively understood by people that are around us. So they tend to draw their own opinions, and that's what gives birth to the whole friend that is stigma.
Yeah.
And society's response to either engaging and supporting people that are unwell, or drawing a conclusion that they're not necessarily an active member in society, they're a lazy worker, so we'll just whack them under some performance management, rather than taking the necessary steps to get in and ask, is everything okay?
Yeah. And Mark, if I could just jump in and
absolutely.
also include, Anna, that I think that in the housing sector, social and affordable housing sector, so many of the incredible professionals in that space are helping other people who are also experiencing mental health crisis. Because, it's a very stressful time when you don't have a roof over your head, let alone, where am I going to get, maybe for some of these people, my next meal, all of those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So I often think about particularly the middle management line in organisations where you're caring for a workforce that are caring for people, and sometimes that parallel processing, so how much trauma can someone take on listening it all day, every day, before it sort of manifests and either morphs into their own if they're not doing good reflective practice or good, debriefing. And so I'd love to hear from you about, and maybe this will come up in the conversation today, but, some of those considerations that maybe you've seen in this sector compared to other sectors in corporate where it may not be about helping other people.
That's right. The age-old "who cares for the carer," right? Yeah. I see it a lot. I see it a lot of times. I see it in emergency services. I see it in frontline health, where their job is to service the community and care for the community, and therefore they're just like a sponge. They take, because it's the actual definition of their role. So if I can't keep taking, I can't perform my role, and yet they're two of the biggest sectors that are experiencing burnout and a high influx of mental injury claims, because they've really got nowhere else to go. I can't admit that I can't do my job anymore, or at this point in time, because I've taken my fill and I'm not well anymore. So it's really interesting to see bits and pieces where organisations need to bring education as a whole into the workplace, and particularly around role clarity and role boundaries, Kel. There's always got to be that part where any organisation, whether it's frontline or whether it's, in line with the Australian Housing Institute and people with, that are servicing people that are homeless, they still deserve role clarity and role boundaries where it stops being customer service and it starts being risk management. And it's really important to define those two when we're housing employees. Use the pun with that too.
Yeah, it's you're spot on, Kel. It's a great question. Anna, let's just go to the Workplace Health and Safety Act and some of the codes that are coming in that we really need our members and member organisations to be aware of and to understand the detail. So, could you step us through maybe a bit of a timeline of what's happening in the background around mental health and the Act?
Yeah, of course. So each and every state has their own respective WHS Act. And within each of those acts, the guidance, and, I'm going to get a bit cheeky here, the guidance is so thin you could spit peas through it, right? It basically just says that every provider needs to provide a safe, supportive and productive environment for all employees, including both physical and psychological safety. That's it. And then you go to the physical components and there's all this compliance, bang, 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 bang. This is what you do. This is what defines safety. This is what you need to do to get there. This is what you need to do to mitigate it. Go on to the psychological side, there's nothing. Right. So people are just guessing. If people are smiling and turning up to work and leaving, then we're probably doing a pretty good job. But what's happening whilst people are at work or indeed outside of work and then coming to work with pre-existing brings this whole complex ball game, right? Where employers are getting pinged for not providing a safe workplace and they didn't even know it. So I feel sorry for a lot of employers because they thought they were doing the right thing. So we don't know what we don't know. So that's pretty much a summary of the WHS Acts in a broad perspective. So what's really exciting is that finally we have got more definition. This is New South Wales only.
Right.
We have got Safe Work Australia has released the psychosocial codes of practice, and they've only gone live in New South Wales. Each state minister has agreed to release each state's respective codes of practice. New South Wales went live in May. I won't put a particular date to it because I've sat through a couple of symposiums and forums and people are banging out different dates, but it's definitely, in my mind, went live on May 21. But I'm hearing early June, but they're active now. WA's code of practice are now out for consultation. Queensland are pinged for next off the bat, closely followed by Victoria. So these codes are coming quickly if they're not already activated in your state. What I love about them is it goes through and defines what a psychosocial risk is.
Yep.
And that's what I think employers and companies have been screaming out for. We'll try and fix it or mitigate it if we know what the damn thing is, right? So what defines risk? So it's got clear risks, 16 of them. This is just the New South Wales one. There won't be a lot of variation from state to state. There might be a few different terms and so forth, but the risks fundamentally are the risks.
Right.
So it really helps when people have a clear outline of what they need to keep an eye on to make sure that people are psychologically safe in their workplaces.
Yeah. Can I just jump in there, Anna? Just a point of clarification. So we've got multiple member organisations who are multi-jurisdictional.
Yep.
So cross borders. So they won't be needing to be running hazard reduction programs that are too dissimilar from one another, I assume.
Absolutely. And I think that I would be very, very surprised if the Australian federal government brought out a bunch of codes that were different, particularly for nationally based and internationally based clients, right? So the psychosocial risks were a universal culmination of experts from all around Australia to talk about what the common risks are. So the risks themselves won't vary too much, if at all. What I do say in response to that, Mark, is that some of the people and companies that you're referring to, if they do have an arm or a leg in the New South Wales border, that they need to be jumping on that code of practice pretty quickly because it is active.
Right.
Now, I want to make something clear as well, is that you will see things splashed around saying these codes are not mandatory. And guess what? They're actually not mandatory. But what they are is another piece of information that can be used in an evidentiary capacity. Right. So it's closing the gap or giving employers less wriggle room to prove that they haven't acted reasonably or in a practicable fashion, right? So it's just getting harder and harder and harder to get around ignoring or not taking seriously or not having psychosocial risk on your agenda.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think we'll cover off as well how employers manage the reporting and the management of incidences. But can we step through, maybe not all 16, but can we step through, and the other thing we'll do too, Anna, is we'll also provide a link to the New South Wales documentation as well. Actually, just on that, it says, I'm seeing it here in front of me, two things at once, what a shock. 28th of May 2021, this was gazetted. So there we go. So could we go through some of the common psychosocial hazards that organisations should be looking for?
Yeah, sure. So what I'll do is I'll name a few of the common ones where your listeners today will be like, well, duh, I already knew that. And then we'll talk about ones that probably they didn't know. So I think the obvious ones where people are going to be like, tell me something new, Anna, would be things like bullying and harassment. Right. So that's an exposure to a traumatic event. Right. People are like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. Other things like, a hazardous physical working environment, because yes, that can be linked to psychosocial trauma.
Yeah.
Poor procedural justice. So when someone's been put under an investigation and they haven't been communicated with, or they've been left out of the loop, they're the pretty obvious ones. And workplace violence being another one. Yeah. The ones that we really need to think about are poor support from managers and supervisors. Bang, that's one clear risk. So how many middle managers, Kellie, back to what you were saying, how many middle managers know how to help themselves, let alone their staff? So a lot of people are sitting ducks there. So important right now, particularly with the ongoing hybrid working environment, is remote and isolated work. What are workplaces doing to make sure that people are safe from a psychosocial perspective when they're remote or isolated? You've got conflict and poor relationships in the workplace, right? There's a lot of it's a very hot topic right now, is where we put the highly skilled, and I want to swear here, but I won't out of respect to your listeners, but you put the highly skilled person that's going to treat a lot of people like crap in the process, but we're still going to hire them because they can do their job. Well, that's taking a big turn, because what that's doing is you're hiring a psychosocial risk just waiting to happen. Another really important one is role clarity. When you've got people running around and there's no boundaries set around their role. So again, Kel, back to what you were saying, that's a psychosocial risk. And if you, as an employer, can't prove that you have acted reasonably or practicably to mitigate any of these risks, it's going to be a really tough one to get out of, because you're going to have the WHS legislation, and then you're going to have the codes of practice as further evidentiary information. So it's going to be really hard to avoid fines, potential indictment from Fair Work Australia, Discrimination Act, the Fair Work Act. It's just going to get that little bit harder. So in my opinion, good, because it's going to force more people to have to act quickly and understand a bit more about this space, because particularly now, people are more vulnerable than ever. So the risk is in every industry, in every sector.
Yeah.
And
hey,
Mark, if I could just jump in with another comment there too, Anna, that was really well, I think, defined, and it's even got me thinking of different roles that I've been in over the years, and through the pandemic experience, when you're leading people in that space too, you might be asking people to do different roles because you don't have an office that's open where people can come in, so you might be having a workforce that's working from home. And you, as a result of their capacity to not be able to fulfill their role in the way that they normally can, which is very fair and legitimate, they might be being asked to do other things. Now, if there's no clarity around that, or even no timelines, or, in already quite an anxious space for people, I could imagine workplaces that aren't really taking the planning and the communication around that seriously. This is a really important time for them to listen up to this.
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it better myself, Kellie. You've absolutely nailed it. And I'm going to add one more thing that's fueling that fear and that vulnerability, is that a lot of employees will just say yes, yes, yes to anything that's asked of them because they're just so grateful for hanging on to their jobs in the turbulent economy that we're in. So I think that this particular conversation, and for the listeners today, you can either take this conversation as somewhere to go, okay, well, we can just keep pushing our staff because we know that they want their jobs and we've got free rein. Or we can use this as an education piece to go, right, we are sitting on a series of psychosocial risks. Let's get in there. Let's consult with our staff. Let's find out where the weak points are and tidy them up. And that's all it is. It's tidying them up. It's not a complex web of years and years and years of work. Yeah. It really is. The foundations are already in an organisation. It's just about identifying each of the risks and working out what needs to be cleaner, communicated better, and adjusted in our current policies and procedures, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and I'd assume best practice would be that'd be a whole of organisation approach rather than being left to the GM people and culture to clean it up. It'd be a great thing for staff to be involved in, to go, right, how do we make this environment happier, friendlier, more supportive? Yeah.
That's right. You will. I mean, the thing is, I mean, we've already crossed this bridge today too, when we spoke about how subjective mental health can be and the stigma around it. So we've already got a trust issue in organisations. We've already got a priority issue in organisations. So if organisations proceed to tackle these risks without bringing their staff in the decision-making process and the information collation process, they're not going to feel valued or included anyway. So they're not going to buy into whatever you direct them to do.
Absolutely. Here's a free comment for any of our viewers that are sitting here who think their organisation aren't going to take these seriously. I would strongly suggest finding a new employer if that's possible. So these are absolutely critical. Can I just ask something, Anna, because it's very, very topical for all of us, not just our industry. But when you talked about the safety for remote and hybrid working staff, so just for context, AHI, all our team pre-pandemic are remote, work from home, from wherever home might be. How does an employer practically check that each one of their employees are okay working from their home environment? How do they go about that?
Yeah, it's a really, really difficult and complex response, Hendo. It's called calling and asking them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There you go.
It really is because it is so busy, you know, and the environment and the economy is palpable with just, you know, pure reaction at the moment. So leaders are caught up, they're busy. But what we tend to forget is, when was the last time I had a one-on-one with my staff member? You know, did I leave it once removed to feed it back to me that person's okay? I don't expect one person with 70 staff to have 70 one-on-ones, and naturally you would have integrated management underneath. But one-on-ones are really important. Understanding that as a leader, we have to be in a heightened state of care at the moment. So it's not about what people say, it's how they say it. What are we really listening for? How often are those phone calls happening? There's a lot of talk in and around camera on, camera off. I'm a bit flexible with that because some companies go, look, it's okay for this meeting if people want to have their camera off, but it's just about better and cleaner communication, because that's all we've got is to communicate from a distance, right? We have to rely on our eyes and our ears through a screen. We don't have the luxury, or a lot of us don't have the luxury of in-person cues anymore. And even if we do have those in-person cues, life on site or life at work still looks very different with social distancing and reduced amount of FTE on site. So even then, you've still got this sort of antiquated distance that's there that we once, you know, were so lucky to have, been closer and more involved with our team. So more one-on-ones. I want every leader, particularly that's listening today, going, when was the last time I had a one-on-one with my direct reports? When was the last time I asked them if they needed anything? When was the last time that I actually spoke about mental health to make it okay to talk about? Because, you know, it really is about leading by example. And I don't mean to sound cheesy, because that, you know, that particular saying's got a lot of dust on it, but geez, it's still got a lot of power, right? If people don't hear their leaders talking about mental health, they're not going to talk about it. I mean, as the good old Gallup Institute would say, whatever a leader does, your staff are going to emulate or return or mirror up to 70%.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we get messaging out there. Have your one-on-ones, put it on your team agendas. If you're having huddles, catch-ups, team meetings, whatever you call them, and get it on the table, because we've got to rely on people coming to us as well. It's not all about us getting in there. We've got to create that seesaw where we're comfortable to ask, but our workers are comfortable to volunteer information.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And if I could share something that we did at Lifeline, we actually would put a number to it. So coming into work on a Monday, we bring our lives to work, and some of those lives can be quite complex and challenging and frustrating. I uniquely think of my wife then when frustrating, because her Mondays usually starts with frustration with something that I probably haven't done on the weekend that I should have. But at Lifeline, we used a scoring system, noting that when we walk into the workplace can't expect us to be running at 110% 24/7 whilst we're at work, noting the fact that we bring baggage from home and challenges in life, etc. So yeah, putting a score to it was something that we did. So it's you're either one, not functioning well, or you're a 4, you're on top of your game. And our role as a team was to manage each other's progress towards a 4, because we wanted people to come to work and love doing what they were doing. So it's an interesting way, but you're right, it's really got to be talked about and made normalized, I suppose.
That's right. And I think that's a great thing, because you know what people are searching for in the world of mental health, not just in the workplace, but in the community, is something tangible, something that they can see and relate to. So I'm going to add another piece onto that too, Mark. If people are willing and able, and a lot of people aren't, because we've still got a long way to go in the area of stigma and mental health, is storytelling.
Yeah.
Right. Storytelling. Be vulnerable. You know, like I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm always sharing thought bubbles. I always look like the person that's all about mental health and knows how to have a mentally healthy lifestyle. But, you know, to share a story myself, you know, I lost one of the most important people in my life 10 weeks ago, being my grandfather, who played the only father figure in my life. And when I got onto LinkedIn and apologized for being missing for a month and told my story, that's probably the most interaction I've had from followers and listeners in my entire career. So if you don't think it works, give it a go, because that just me being vulnerable and not the mental health expert, not the person giving other people tips.
Yeah.
I got more comments, more loves, more hope you're okays, love your work, and a kind of comments that I've ever had. And that's because I shared a simple story and I was vulnerable and honest.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
Nice one. Well, I think your grandfather would be very proud of you, Anna.
Oh, I can guarantee he would be, mate. He'd probably be offering me a beer, but oh no, it's after 12. He'd be okay.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Hey, Kellie, Dunn, some of that commentary from Anna would have struck a chord with you, no doubt. And getting the workplace, mentally well, mentally healthy. What have you seen on your journey that's worked to get an environment really firing?
Yeah, that's a really great point to ponder, Mark. And I think for me, having led different teams in different organisations across community services over the last 20 years, and growing and evolving as a human being myself and a mum, and, you know, all those other things which are great assets, I think, for anyone who's had me as a leader, is all those other things that I can bring that help me. The biggest thing that I think that I would love more organisations to talk about with each other is values. Yeah. So when I've walked into teams where there is extreme conflict, and you can just tell, you know, you can cut the air with a knife, it's just that thick, you know, and nearly can touch it with your hands. The tension between people who deeply care about their client cohorts, they're there for all the right reasons in terms of why they're doing the work, but can't do it with each other. It's exceptional, and I think the greatest tool that I was ever taught was about having those open and honest conversations. But if they're not going anywhere, like if you're having them, but then people are walking away either more distressed or like, hang on, we feel like we're on the spinning wheel, like a mouse just going round and around and around, then as a leader, you have to do something to disrupt and stop that, I guess. And so having those deep dives into teams around values, because if I'm if I'm working, for example, with a particular cohort, and say, for example, it's I'll use the family violence sector as this is a very clear black and white example. But if I've always worked with victim survivors and I'm always about helping people, you know, find their voice and feel empowered, then I turn and start working with men who use family violence. So say I go, right, let's change this, and I want to make a really strong impact over this way. And I start working with people that are still wanting to help victim survivors, which is, of course, everyone wants to, and they're working in working with perpetrators or men who use family violence. But what I might find is that I have people who want to shame men who are using family violence. So if I'm there going, no, hang on, we're here as to be part of the solution, not the problem. We're not here to shame. I've already got a values-based difference with my colleagues. So for us to sit around the table and have a good, open and honest conversation. Yeah. You know, so housing, let's look at housing. So say I want to find housing for somebody who is extremely violent, who sells drugs, who, you know, other people who I might be asking for help to help find accommodation for this person or this family or whatever it is, might go, no, I have other people more worthy. Right. You know, so I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've walked away in the last 5 years trying to understand as a leader. Who are these people in this team sitting around me, and are they coming from the same values based? And if they're not, what do I as a leader need to do about this? What is my responsibility? And when do I knock on someone else's door and ask for help? Because it also creates a really strong impact, I think, if you're an empathic leader.
Yeah, and I suppose when you knock on the door for help, someone's there giving you, being
That's
there
right.
for you is really important. Hey, Anna, can I just ask something on the hazards list, the 16, and again, just for the people watching this, we'll put a link here to the document. One of the ones I find really interesting, one of the hazards is known as the inadequate reward and recognition. Let me just read out for you the examples that they use in this New South Wales document. For example, workers' efforts are not recognised is first dot point. The second one is, and this is interesting for us as an organisation, Kel particularly, there aren't reasonable opportunities for skills development and fair career advancement. That's a really interesting, that's probably not, wouldn't have, well, it certainly shocked me, not shocked, but it surprised me that is a psychosocial hazard.
Mm. So you asking me that, Mark?
Yeah, Anna, yeah. Can you elaborate on that? What have you seen work?
That would be in instances where there's been lack of role clarity, right? Yeah. So you'll be surprised how these risks all interweave. So if someone's been given a clear progression, what would be the word? Trajectory, right? Yeah. And people know exactly what they need to do to get in a particular position to be considered for a particular promotion, and that's all clarity as well. The whole trajectory is clear. Yeah. Or you're coming to work and this will be your role forever. But if you are looking to develop your skills in any other format, let us know, because there's roles that are just roles and people are happy with that, or there's people that go in and want to, but it's where people are in those particular positions and in those trajectory roles where they're not given fair and equitable opportunity to apply and be considered for particular positions. And then that investigation process hasn't been seen to be fair and equitable. That's where we can run into trouble, right? Because the employer isn't acting reasonably and practicably, but secondly, it's just a hell of a lot of stress for that person that is obviously trying to work as hard as they can to seek that reward, and that reward being promotion. The process isn't clear, or the process has had a level of backhandedness to it where it just hasn't stuck to its guns and been clear in the parameters about how to get to the next position. So it can get a little bit complex, but for the sake of listeners today, it literally is, if you're going to promise trajectory or progression in your organization, be clear about what is required to get there and keep communication constant and open when those opportunities arise. That's the safest way to be able to navigate and mitigate those risks, or at least help reduce them.
Yeah, perfect. Now, Anna, one of the things that we learned, we had a summit in June, and we heard from some international speakers on on management and leadership, and one of the points that they made was middle management is not equipped to lead the current workforce in its current mode of working. Okay, so let's I think we could all probably say that's probably fair for a number of things in this COVID kind of world we're in. Now, if you're a middle manager, you're listening to this interview and discussion today, and you've got 16 psychosocial hazards in front of you. So you've got to try and do your job. You've got to hit your numbers. You've got to keep your customers happy. You've got to keep your boss happy. You've got to keep the board happy, etc. And I've got to think of these 16 things that we have as an organisation to also make sure we're doing well. What's your tip for Mr. or Mrs. Middle Manager who's sitting there going, oh my God, they now want us to do something more?
That's a really great question. My first opening tip would be it's not all the responsibility of that middle manager.
Yeah.
What that middle manager needs in order to middle manage is upper management taking this stuff seriously and providing adequate skills, capability, guidance, and expectations around how to mitigate these risks. We can't expect Mr. or Mrs. Middle Management to be able to go, oh, I attended this great session with Mark and Anna and Kellie the other day. I know exactly what I'm doing now. This takes time and investment in order to get correct, in order to support people to execute it. So what that means is, and it's the age-old saying, the fish's head rots from the top, right? So you can't, and I have this conversation with clients all the time. If I'm approached by someone from middle management going, Anna, we want you to come and run some training, or we want you to come and do a keynote, I will turn around and go, when can I have a chat to your GM, CFO, COO, CEO? And they're like, oh, no, this is just for us. I actually do decline to be involved because it can't inject in the middle. So therefore, the middle management and the success of middle management in this space depends on those CEOs and senior management that are listening in today, because they can't do it without you. They can't do it without vision, alignment, and commitment. And what that means is just a clear policy, a clear procedure, some adequate training, so they have a little bit more in their back pocket to have a look at these skills, these risks. Because otherwise we're just going to be doing what we've been doing for in my career, the last 18 years, and that's putting a blindfold on and hoping for the best.
Yeah, and waiting for a crisis to hit us right in the face.
That's exactly right, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. So what I'm hearing there, it's a culture of safety. It's a system of safety that supports everyone, whether you're the head honcho or not. You know, you got that support structure around you, but it's believed in. Yeah.
It is absolutely, and I get into quite robust arguments, Mark, about this.
That shocks me.
I know, right? I'm very shy. I get most annoyed, and that's being polite, when people try and make the practice of psychosocial safety something else other than safety.
Right.
It is absolute safety, because you can be as fit as a fiddle, eat well, work out every day, and go to work, and people are like, wow, you know, Mark's looking fit and healthy and whatever, but you could be suffering from chronic anxiety, but we'll just make that a yoga session, a fruit box, and stick an "Are you okay" poster on the back of the toilet door. That should be enough.
Yeah.
But yet that healthy, fit Mark is about to get behind a 2.5 ton loader and operate the damn thing, when 9 other lives depend on whether this guy is absolutely focused on his job. And if he's fighting anxiety all day, the increase in human error is phenomenal. So you cannot have one without the other. You need to be well, you need to be well from a mental health perspective and a physical health perspective. So they are absolute safety. And what I like too is, when you scoop it under safety, don't be too afraid of the codes in that sense. They just need to clip in to your overarching and your current safety system that you have. It doesn't have to be something brand new and shiny and expensive and labor sucking. It just needs to clip in and go, okay, well, this is how we mitigate physical. How do we mitigate psychosocial? So it doesn't need to be something new. It just needs to be an addition.
Yeah, absolutely. Kel, you were going to comment, I think.
Oh no, I'm just sitting here in agreement, and Anna, it just warms my heart so much with the way that you very clearly can help make it a bit of a, for something that's so grey, is in mental health, making it black and white in terms of our responsibilities as an organisation, to sit down and just map through that. Of course, the actual tangible results might be very grey in terms of, you don't really know, Mark, your system of, one being not very well and 5 being on top of the world, or, that's a great way for a synopsis in a moment. But for someone's ongoing mental well-being, we know they're going to be up and down, because we are. If you've got a heart that beats and a brain that thinks, you've got mental health, and we are responsible for our own mental health well-being. But of course, in a workplace, they have so much ripple effects out onto our mental health well-being. And Anna, why I'm sitting here excited is because, when we reached out to you and said, hey, we'd love to have a conversation, because this is such an important conversation for our members, so important, who do great work and could potentially be putting themselves at risk without realising until it's too late. And these are good people doing good work, but legislation is important, and it's there for a really good reason. And so the training that we've talked about, you coming on board, and we've talked about offering 1 or 2 trainings for our membership, just to see if they can go, yes, this is something that we want to know more about, and then linking you in with our corporate organisation so that you can do from the top down work, which is super important. But we've talked about in our program overviews for a 4-hour mental health for managers session, looking at definition, signs and symptoms. So how do I know when someone isn't okay, or maybe they're telling me they're okay, but some of them feel right in my gut. It tells me that, I need to ask more, but I'm a little bit scared to, so having training around those conversations, and combining that with legislative requirements, care versus performance management, that is a big one.
It's huge.
And how do I, as somebody who is empathic and really cares about the person in front of me, still have that really important and focused performance management conversation? And so I think that for me is one of the biggest sellers for having a training with you, is that those real tangible conversations are important, and boundaries for me as a manager.
Yeah, that's right, Kellie. And I think you've absolutely nailed it. What the clear message is that as an employer, it's not your responsibility to fix this person's issue. It is your responsibility to provide an environment where they are protected as much as possible, but also nurtured as much as possible whilst they're recovering from stuff that might not have anything to do with the workplace, right?
Yeah.
So the training itself, really, it's an approach where we talk about permission, we talk about a bit of confidence, we talk about boundaries, and basically it is just good, grunty human skills so people can sit down that day and apply it that afternoon, right? Yeah. So it's not about committing to forms and homework and weeks of this. It's basically just hearing from someone that's seen in the industry what works, what doesn't, what keeps the company safe and what protects the employer. And there is just such an easy way to do it. People just need to know about it.
Yeah, nice and simple, nice and practical by the sound of that, Anna.
Oh, that's it. All we need is a bit of practicality, Mark. We've got screens and information coming at us left, right and centre. We don't want to be another one of those.
Yeah. We've got more data than we know what to do with. So that's so true. Hey, Anna, I want to talk about managing critical incidents in the workplace. So let's take our situation. We've got someone in the workplace who's come to us and said they're struggling for a whole bunch of reasons. The reasons are not, I suppose, relevant necessarily. What do we do?
Yeah, it's a good question. Do you know of anyone that might have the answer to that, Mark?
Oh, I think we've probably all got the answer. I know in my context, I know the model I talked about before, the scoring model. One of my team came in one day. He was always working around 3, 4 and a 5. Very even-tempered, great human, great person. She came to work one day and said, I'm a 1. And I went, holy hell, that's not good for anyone, but particularly this person. And she was going through a marriage breakdown.
No.
So what she needed to know was her work performance was irrelevant at that time. So she didn't need to focus on being the productive human that she'd always been. It's about managing what's at home first is first priority. So I think, you know, that wasn't because there was a system in place. That was because there was intuition in place, and we really cared for her as a human.
Yep.
So I think that's the human side of probably what managers need to be able to tap into. But obviously the system side is pretty important too, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that. And there was a reason why I table tennis that question back to you, because you're coming at us from an environment that was very alert in the space of mental health.
Correct.
So you take 98% of industry, the majority of the mental health is just this, well, it is that fruit box, it is that yoga class, you know, it is that, and even if that, right? So when we talk about critical incidents, there's general mental health or mental illness management until it is no longer general and we hit crisis, right? So when I talk about critical incidents, I just want to make clear to our listeners today what that means. Yeah. Because anything up until this point will be one of those boundary, permission, and confidence conversations, until we reach a stage where someone says, I'm thinking about taking my life, I'm thinking about harming myself, or maybe one of Mr. and Mrs. Middle management might be listening today, or a CEO or whoever, and you've actually asked the question, are you thinking about taking your life? Are you thinking about committing suicide? And that person's responded yes. So then I up that question a level and go, what does an employer do then? What does an employer do when someone has a panic attack? What does an employer do if it's the first time that person's ever had a panic attack? How do we know the difference between a heart attack and a panic attack? The symptoms are almost identical. What do we do if one of our employees that suffers a level of psychosis has a relapse off medication and has an episode at work, be it, you know, major or mild? What does an employer do then? And for our listeners, you can be Googling like crazy right now. You're not going to find this anywhere, okay? It's not part of legislation. It's not part of industrial relations. I haven't seen it anywhere. It's one of those things where people are just winging it. And particularly now, and I think it was Kellie, you mentioned before, or Mark, you mentioned before that, you know, Lifeline in itself is getting more calls. I know that Victoria had their record and New South Wales hit their record about 3 weeks ago. I think it was one call every 30 seconds. Yeah. So the likelihood, it's not about if, it's about when. You as a manager or a leader or a co-worker, for those of you listening today, has to actually respond to someone in crisis. So again, we've spoken about the complexity of mental health, and we've spoken about the fear and the grey area about mental health in work. Now let's put critical event management in there. So people tend to back right off, or they just pick up that phone and dial the police. So you can imagine when someone's been vulnerable and been honest, because Mark, you've asked me the question. I work for you, Anna, you haven't been yourself lately. You've dropped the ball at work. You haven't been talking to anyone. I haven't seen you haven't been eating very much. Is everything okay? And we have a conversation and I say a few things and you're like, look, I'm just hearing a few things. I have to ask the question because I care. Are you thinking about taking your life? And I turn around and I say yes. And then you leave and go and call the police. And I'm not saying that's what you do, Mark, but I'm saying that's what a lot of employers do because that's all they know, ambulance or police. And then I'm then collected from that place of work, and we'll talk about hybrid in a minute. And a bunch of my co-workers have watched me get taken out by police or taken out on a stretcher. What do you think my return to work rate and dignity is going to be like? I mean, my dignity will still be spinning under the back tire of the door. And I'm not going to want to come back to work in a hurry because I would be humiliated. I was a show pony. And I just think, and what I've been trialing with a lot of my clients is just a better way to do it. There's always a space for police and ambulance, but I don't believe they belong at every critical event. And I think that there is 3 reasons why we need some sort of a system. And that is for care. That is for safety. So when I say care, I mean duty of care. For safety of the person that's experiencing the event, but also the people, particularly as you were saying, Kel, the people that respond to that person. and most importantly, for a bit of bloody dignity.
Yeah.
Right? That is the most important thing. These people are not in control of what's happening to them. They are unwell. It's an illness. And there's a very, very big hypertensive element of criminality there when we see those flashing lights. And it does nothing for the stigma and reintegration of that person when they get well enough to come back to work. So with one call every 30 seconds, every employer is going to experience this. And what kept me very, very busy, particularly between the months of October and December last year, primarily in Victoria, where, you know, you guys have been hammered with the longest lockdowns and the harshest lockdowns, is you really got to see people under the pump between those months. They were done. They were cooked. So rather than me doing my general mental health consulting and setting up systems for people, which is great and forms part of our first part of our conversation, what kept me busy was phone calls at 8 o'clock at night because someone that was actually still working on site had found someone had taken their life on site, or they had a bunch of staff responding to a co-worker that had taken their life. So a lot of more panic attacks were happening in the workplace, right? And they were just like, ambulance. There's a system that we can put into place that can set organisations up to better protect the person that's unwell, but also your first responders, but get them back to work a bit more quickly.
Yeah.
And safely, because we tend to leave medical clearance out of a lot because workplaces are just winging it. You know, I might say to you, Mark, yeah, I do want to take my life, but not right now. And then Mark, you turn around and go, okay, well, just let me know if you need anything, go back to work. No. You can't stay at work today, buddy.
Yeah.
And that's not because we're condemning you. We care about you and we need to get you to help. So there's a couple of options of how we're going to do that today. And that is, we're going to call someone that you care about to come and get you. Yeah. And if you won't volunteer that information, then we will have to call an ambulance, but you can't stay here today because you've just made a pretty serious threat. And we care about your safety, and we need to make sure about, as part of our duty of care, that we get you to someone qualified to make a determination about how safe you are to stay at work or continue to perform work. But yet, this serious issue, there's no guidance, there's no policies, there's no procedures, there's no directive from the government about what this looks like. Everyone's just left to their own devices, the way we always have been for mental health management in workplaces the past decade, 15 years, 20 years. So it's a really topical, interesting, scary, and I understand scary component for a lot of employers to even start thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough thing, and I must say, for those people watching this video, you know, if any of this conversation triggers you in any way, there are plenty of support services for you. And as a card-carrying member of Lifeline, I could, and knowing a lot of those people on the end of the phone, it's a great place to talk, to ring and talk on 13 11 14 if you need anything. That is a really tough kind of situation to have, and probably not something too many people want to stare down the gauntlet at and start thinking about that. But as you quite rightly state, and having been in a workplace where someone had taken their life in the past, it is definitely something you have to think about and put some wraparound services. So it is real, it does happen, and God forbid it doesn't happen to any of us at any time.
That's right. And like anything that's uncomfortable, like anything that's not desired, people do fear it, but it is such a very real thing. And you know me, Mark, I'm not backwards in coming forwards. I will talk about this stuff so very directly and with such passion because it is happening multiple times daily. And it doesn't matter what critical event we're talking about. It could be suicide, it could be panic attacks, it could be suicidal ideation or a psychotic episode. It's all depends on the individual, but it's all critical. And it needs a critical response that's fairer and kinder and more effective for people that are having these events in workplaces. And there is a system to do it. It can be a bit of a confronting system, but it is resulting in a better outcome for all people involved, because as we've been speaking about in our previous session, is that people just need a bit of clarity and a bit of confidence about what to do. You know, there's plenty of information out there about having an "Are you okay?" conversation, and that's great. I'm a big advocate for that. But what I fear there is not enough information about is, okay, what do we do when the what hits the fan? Very few people I see standing on stages, very few people and very few posters I see giving people a step-by-step about how to get someone that is suicidal to appropriate care and help in a dignified way out of a workplace.
Yeah. Yep.
And then the second thing to consider is, how does that work through a screen? So, enter stage left, a new layer of something that we need to put our attention to. There are answers to that, but there is a whole piece around, well, what does your privacy and information look like? Because Kel, you and I are having a meeting. You grab your chest and you're like, I can't breathe. I've got chest pains. And I asked you, have you ever felt this way before? And you're like, no, I've never felt this way before. How can I possibly get Kel an ambulance if I have no information about who is living in her household or where her address is? So I'm not saying that this is clear and permissible for every organisation. What I'm trying to do is get people to start thinking that hybrid working is not going away, right? It may reduce in the future, but it is really pivoted the way business does business. So it's important to really think, well, who gets access to information, not to get inside Kellie's life, but I just want to get her some help.
Yeah.
So Kellie's emergency contact might not be the person that she's currently residing in, and there could be a life at stake right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and we certainly picked up on that. That was also a good one, Kel, that we did. It was a webinar we did last year on family violence, and the fact that people go to work, leave the home to. A lot of people go into a safe and secure workplace, which is their office or wherever that might be. Now they're forced to be at home with the perpetrator of that violence. And I remember when that came out of the person's mouth, I went, "Oh my God, that is exactly what could be happening." So you do have a role. I do note just on a lighter note, Anna, that Kellie does often clutch her chest in laughter when I let one of my regular dad jokes go. Kellie, that's a fair call, isn't it?
Where would we be without those dad jokes?
I don't know. Are you that funny, mate?
we tell Mark he is, Anna, and that makes him happy. It's good for his mental health.
Oh, excellent. At least you guys know your clarity and your boundaries.
That's exactly right.
That's right. I think they call that stroking the ego. Okay, no, that's a really interesting. Now, the other people I think about, the other cohort of people who are probably watching this perhaps and sitting there going, geez, something that we've got to get on the radar and get on the radar quickly. Not just company officers, but or company executives, but boards, so directors.
Yep.
So the chain of responsibility, and can we talk through that, the role of boards and governance instruments to make sure that the organisation's got the systems and processes in place? What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there isn't really much difference between trusts and boards, Mark, than what there is trying to get a CEO committed and aligned to this particular area. To me, I view them all as one. I mean, if a board's blocking a CEO initiative, then sure, we'll go and speak at a board and trust level. But unfortunately, it needs, when I get attention from boards and trustees, I have to play the bottom line.
Right.
So, right, I know that the three of us, have a very personal level of attachment and passion about people that experience mental illness and wanting to help them. But that doesn't necessarily play out the same way in business, right? So I think that people and boards underestimate the financial loss and the impact of the bottom line just through, and I won't say ignorance, or I could say polite ignorance, right? Because we don't know what we don't know, but we hemorrhage money in workers' compensation premiums. We hemorrhage money on people that are coming to work and they're so unwell they can only give you 30% of their output a day. Yep. So that's that good old presenteeism. So the company's burning and churning, but all of this cash is just flowing like a river, right? That can be prevented, that can be stopped. You can have those dollars back and invest it to make a bigger, healthier, safer company, or invest it in whatever else you need to. So it really, and it is probably 80% of the time, Mark, that if I'm going to get sign off from a CEO or a board or a group of trustees, it really has that huge financial flavour, which is so easy to talk about and so easy to I mean, if anyone's interested, you know, PricewaterhouseCoopers has done some good analysis. There's a little bit of dust on it. It's probably getting a little bit old at the moment, so excuse that. But the fundamental message in there is, you invest in this stuff, you're going to get your money back 2.5 times.
Yeah, yeah.
So
that's a report, Anna, is it? PwC?
Yeah, yes, it's PwC report. I actually didn't write the name of it down. I probably should have. It's one of those lengthy ones. Let me.
Okay. But if we find it, we'll post it with the video when
we'll attach that. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So board directors sitting around the boardroom table, maybe the boardroom monitor, I should say these days.
Yeah.
Sitting around the monitor, getting a an account of the business from the CEO. What's the question the director should ask the CEO around what we're talking about today, the mental health and welfare of the people? Is there a question that they can ask, or a KPI that they can see that gives them some comfort that it's not just tick the box exercise?
Look, I think that I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel, right? And that is, have a look, because on every board table or monitor is, what we call, long-term injury frequency rates, right? So your LTIFRs. And what that means, because I know we spoke about not using acronyms, because I don't even like acronyms, is basically how many people are being injured and how long are they not at work for, right? So AKA, what's that costing me? Yeah. You can do the exact same for people that are mentally unwell. However, here's where the problem lies, and here's where a lot of boards and trusts and CEOs and risk professionals get a bit irky or a bit hesitant, is when I look at risk management systems where people have logged broken arm, fell downstairs, tripped on cords, slipped on wet grass, mental health is just put into an other bucket.
Yeah.
And so it will be a real banging my head against a brick wall conversation if I can't show a CEO how many people have had a depressive episode, how many people have had an anxiety attack, how many people have had suicidal ideation. And this is an ongoing argument, right? So I want to be a realist. I like to be realistic here. I would prefer people to at least start putting in measures where we can increase capability and catch things earlier. The risk reporting will be a robust discussion with your relevant employment lawyer as to what you want to disclose in your risk management system, who has access to it and who protects that information. But realistically, moving into the future, that will be primarily driven by psychosocial risk, is we have to know what the actual risk was or is in order to prevent it, reduce it, or mitigate it.
Yeah.
It can't just sit in an other bucket, because then we don't know, we don't know what's wrong with that person, and we don't know how long they were off for or what that cost. It's just in another bucket with a dollar figure attached to it. And that's really hard to get people engaged with and invested in, if we don't start looking at what does privacy look like in and around reporting mental injury in the workplace, what was the causation, and what was the investigation and outcome of that. And without knowing the injury and the individual, then we don't stand a chance.
So could you then therefore say that if you're a board director reading the risk management report for the month, and it has something like other or no level of I want to say the word specificity, but I really struggle with that word. I might chop that out of this. Maybe I'll leave it in for authentic reasons. But if you're not seeing the specifics as a board director, is that the trigger to go, hey, hold on, guys, there's something in this that we need to pull apart?
It can work that way, or it can work the complete opposite. I don't completely understand what that is. It's not giving me a glaring risk. Therefore, my attention is going to be directed by other shiny things over here.
Yeah.
So it could be either way, Mark. You could be bang on the money, or it could work in complete opposite, depending of the organisation.
But would you say to that director, it's worth probing?
Absolutely.
You need other is not an answer, clearly.
Other is not an answer, but it's the safest answer for a lot of organisations.
Yeah.
Right? So,
definitely. Yeah, I think that's really important.
And that's an interesting comment, because it's an uncomfortable conversation in the moment, but it could save a lot more uncomfortable conversations down the track when a CEO has to sit in front of a board and explain why their premiums are so high, or that they are, that there is an investigation that could mean that, a lot of people around that table are going to get in trouble.
Absolutely. And there's a set clear bunch of rules that you can take as a CEO to a trustee or a board and go, our turnover is through the roof. We've had X amount of people leave this year because they've reported that the culture's crap, that they didn't get along with their supervisor, that they didn't have enough resources, that they were overworked, or that they were being bullied. Yeah. And you can and then you can guarantee that, that's all psychosocial related. So turnover's an impact. Presenteeism's an impact. We've got a bunch of people sitting here that we're paying that are giving us 40, 30, 50% of their capability because their heads are not in the space, right? They're worried about everything else and there's nothing at work to help them cope. And there aren't conversations happening in order for them to talk about what they need. Then you've got your workers' comp, but your workers' comp really comparatively is nothing compared to absenteeism and presenteeism. Workers' comp, you're looking at around about, this is just the PwC report that we'll attach to the release, was around about $146 million, right? Which sounds like a lot of money, but your presenteeism sitting around about 4.6 billion. Your absenteeism pretty much the same. So it's really important from a prevention point of view that you bring in capability. So we've got that. And now the important thing heading into the future, right? And that is every board and every trustee wants the best possible applicant to give the best possible output so the company sustains growth and security. General rule of business. If you don't start putting your emphasis and your time and your resources behind creating a psychosocially safe environment, welcome to the era of millennials and Gen Zs. They're looking for cultures like that.
Yep.
And they will happily turn down a role with you because culture is very quickly starting to catch up to cash. So you won't be able to monopolize by high pay packets for much longer. Culture is becoming very important because these kids are learning at a lot younger age the importance of mental health and what their rights and obligations are to be able to work for a psychologically safe employer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a huge reputational piece there as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, Anna, for being with us today on Industry Connect, and you too, Kel. I feel incredibly enlightened, energized in this conversation. This is a tough topic. Let's not ignore that. But it's really good that we've got an environment and a community that are willing to have this conversation, Anna. It's really great that you've been with us today. Kellie, you mentioned a bit earlier that we're going to do some training with Anna. Let me just announce that now, that on Wednesday, the 20th of October from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m, we'll be holding our first A Manager's Guide to Building Mental Health Safety in the Workplace. That's a public workshop. The time of 11 a.m. to 3 p.m, so we can capture those of you in the West, in the Western Australia. It's going to be early start for you, but also our colleagues in New Zealand as well. Although we're talking about some codes that are being influenced around some of the Australian kind of workplace health and safety environment, it's going to be applicable to the New Zealand environment as well. So just to let people know, Wednesday the 20th of October, go to theahi.com.au for more information. We'll also work with Anna. We're going to be announcing soon a directors edition as well. So specifically for board members and directors in the sector who are responsible from a governance perspective around some of this stuff, we're going to be doing some work with Anna, and we'll be announcing that as well. So the program covers mental health, signs and symptoms, the legislative requirements, care versus performance management, managing boundaries, having conversations, etc. There's some really great stuff in there that we're going to work with Anna to give our members some great information. You can learn more about Anna Feringa at annaferinga.com.au, and also on her LinkedIn. And Anna, you'll be comfortable with people reaching out and getting some more connections from the housing, social and affordable housing sector.
Oh, absolutely. I think our listeners understood today that I'm not. I'm partial to a chat, so please reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anna, can I just say very, very sincerely, it's been great. We've spent a good 2 hours together today, and it's really inspiring, the work that you do and the messages that you're delivering into the community. So powerful. So thank you on behalf of Kellie and myself and our members for your time today. Any closing remarks?
Oh, look, I need to table tennis back what you just gave me, Mark and Kellie, and that is, thank you for involving me in the Australasian Housing Institute. I think what all of you and your members do is absolutely insurmountable to the space of mental health and general survival. So it's an absolute pleasure and an honour to work alongside you guys. Yep. And I love mental health and I love making it easy for people. So let's get in there and save some jobs and lives. And I hope to see a few of the members soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, out of 10, Anna, how would you rate our Kellie and I's facilitation of this interview today?
Is that in comparison to me, mate?
No, just in isolation. Out of 10, what would you give us out of 10?
I better be polite then. I better give you a 9.875.
Oh, that's a shame because we use a different model. One's the best, 10's the worst. So anyway, that's
oh, right. So you called me out on that. Well done. Well done.
Always check the scoring method. But no, Anna, again, thank you. And Kellie, it's always fantastic to have you involved in these kind of conversations because, again, you've got a lot to offer and add, especially in the mental health space, but the learning space more broadly. So thank you, mate. And our thoughts are with the people of Ballarat who might be going into lockdown tonight. So
yeah, they sure are.
September.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll be there for you. So thanks again, guys. Thanks for being part of Industry Connect.
Thank you.